Good afternoon. Magandang hapon sa lahat. It's the afternoon greeting from my country, the Philippines. My name is Crislin May Huerta, and I am an international student in the School of Communication and Culture, taking up Master of Arts in Intercultural and International Communication here at Royal Roads University. I wanted to acknowledge that Royal Roads University is on the lands of the Kosopsuan and Likungen ancestors and families. With gratitude, we live, work, and learn here, where the past, present, and future of Indigenous and non-Indigenous students, faculty, and staff come together. I am very much excited to welcome you to this afternoon's conference session entitled Ethics in Real Time, a Sample Lesson in Communication Ethics with Robert Remington as our speaker. Before joining Royal Roads University in 2017, Robert Remington had a 4-decade career in Canadian journalism that included positions as a reporter, editor, columnist, and national and international correspondent. He was nominated for a National Newspaper Award and is a recipient of a Missioner Award citation for public service journalism. His co-authored book about Canada's youngest multiple killer runaway devil was 7 weeks on the Globe and Mail's bestseller list. He reported from post-conflict zones in Kenya, Uganda, and Guatemala, and wrote extensively on international development from Pakistan, India, and Central Asia. Since joining Royal Roads as an associate faculty member in the fall of 2017, he has taught communication in ethics and writing for the media. Today's session will be 45 minutes in length, and we hope to have time for questions at the end. I will go off camera momentarily, but I will be gathering questions that you post in the chat throughout the discussion. At the end, time permitting, I will come back on camera and pose your questions to the panelists. Welcome to this afternoon's panel, and for what I know will be a very interesting and engaging discussion. I now turn you over to Robert.
Well, thank you very much, Christy. It's so nice to meet you, and thank you for that very kind introduction. As Christy told you, I spent 40 years in the field of journalism. And everything, I'm here to tell you what you already know, that everything I wrote in the last 40 years was fake. It was false. It can't be trusted. It simply can't. It was all a lie. Because the mainstream media is part of this global cabal of government and big data and NGO and law enforcement and scientists and academia and others who are attempting to force the world into a liberal communist groupthink designed to benefit the elites. And the mainstream media is just another cog in that unholy wheel. The mainstream media is simply the communications arm of this organized league waging an information war to control the world and suppress dissent. Now, none of that is true, of course, but that is the narrative that's being pushed largely on social media. I'm going to try and not read the chats because I'll end up laughing at some of my students who are in the room. So I teach a course in communication ethics here at Royal Roads. And one of the approaches I use is called ethics in real time. And in ethics in real time, students are asked to mine the public sphere, the big evil corporate mainstream media, if you will, for current or recent events that represent a moral or ethical dilemma. And we ask students a fundamental question. We ask students how to solve that moral or ethical dilemma. We ask them to answer the question, what's the right thing to do? And it could be a variety of things that are in the public sphere in the media. It could be bioethics, for instance. It could be masks or no masks. It could be political communication. For instance, is Donald Trump culpable? Should he be held responsible for the mob attack on the US Capitol on January 6th of last year? Maybe it could be animal rights. Should horse-drawn carriages be banned in Alberta? Banned in Victoria. And the nice thing that I like to think about this course is that students get to choose their own subject matter for the most part. And they have to resolve these ethical or moral questions using some tools. And the tools that we give them are primarily classical Western ethical theories that have guided humankind for centuries. For instance, we look at the virtue ethics of Aristotle, the utilitarian ethics of Jeremy Bentham and his student John Stuart Mill. We look at the duty ethics or deontology of the German philosopher Immanuel Kant. We look at some political theorists like the 17th century British writer Thomas Hobbes. And we also look at some modern theories. We look at libertarianism. We look at the justice theory of John Rawls. And it's not just dead white guys all the time. There is also some feminist theory that for the students in the room, we actually will be getting to that in the next couple of weeks. And in addition to these ethical theories, we ask students who are trying to solve these moral and ethical dilemmas in the public sphere to apply codes of ethics as well to solve this moral or ethical dilemma. And how long ago did I get muted? I'm not sure how long, about 30 seconds ago. Okay. So I think when I somehow got muted, I was talking about how we ask students to mind the public sphere for issues that present moral or ethical dilemmas. And we ask them to apply ethical theories, classical ethical theories, and also apply codes of ethics from the fields of like public relations, journalism, business communication, that sort of thing. And we put it all in a blender and we turn on the blender and out pops the answer to the question that we're trying to resolve. Well, no, not really, because ethics does not always give us the right answer, but it provides a guide. And the students get to make the decision themselves. There's no wrong answers as we go through this ethics in real time. The answer they make is theirs to defend based on the modes of moral reasoning and codes of ethics. And we'll get to an example, hopefully, about that a little later in the presentation if we have time. So in ethics in real time this week, in the last several days, one of the issues is that the mainstream media, the big evil mainstream corporate media, became the story. In covering the convoy protests, the Freedom Convoy in Ottawa, reporters were swarmed, they were harassed, they were spat on, they were called Nazis, they were shoved. One female reporter from CBC was surrounded and she was called a whore. One Quebec reporter was pushed from behind by a protester. Evan Solomon of CTV News, it got too dangerous for him to be outside. He actually had to move inside the studio. There was one global reporter who was swarmed. Another TV crew had to be escorted out of one area by police after being surrounded by angry protesters. Now, reporters don't like being escorted by the police because it fits into this narrative that we're just part of this machinery that's trying to control the world, if you will. And there was a person who said that the mainstream media deserved to be hanged. And it got so bad that in Edmonton, where there were similar protests to Ottawa, CTV News had to remove the company decals from their vehicle because it just became too dangerous for reporters. And it's not just mainstream media that's going through this. Here in Victoria, a worker from Island Health, which is the main health service agent for this area, was driving into James Bay, where I live, just behind the legislature, and there was a anti-mandate protest going on, and people were driving around in their trucks and honking horns, and there were protesters. And these protesters saw this vehicle from Island Health, and the vehicle from Island Health was swarmed. And because Island Health is telling us to wear masks, and it's imposing mandates, and all these things that the protesters were against. And Island Health, like CTV News in Edmonton, has had to remove insignia from its vehicles because that's how bad the situation has gotten. So where did this come from? How did we get here? Well, Donald Trump, of course, called the media the enemy of the people, the fake news media. At his rallies, he was signaling people out, signaling the media out, and they were being booed. And Donald Trump claims to have invented the term fake news, but in fact, the term fake news was used about 20 years ago in a book and a subsequent documentary called Toxic Sludge is Good for You, which chronicles some of the questionable ethical practices of some of the more notorious spin doctors of the public relations industry. But now this hatred of mainstream media, this vitriol that we're experiencing, it's everywhere. And the other day, I found a Facebook page, a local Facebook page here in Victoria. I'm not going to tell you what the name of it is because the people aren't here to answer questions or to defend themselves. But it has 4,500 members, and it seems to have been started by a person from Victoria whose identity I couldn't really confirm because this person's profile picture of it is in fact a man I don't know. It's basically a truck emblazoned with the fringe minority. There's no information, there's no name, there's no information at all about this person, where they're from, who they are, not a stitch of information, and maybe the name is actually fake, we don't know. And the evil mainstream media isn't allowed to do that. Journalists, mainstream journalists, credible mainstream journalists follow a code of ethics. For instance, the Canadian Association of Journalists, and one of the principles in their codes of ethics is the principle of transparency. You don't use pseudonyms. You don't misrepresent who you are. But the same doesn't apply to social media. So this group that I found, which has 4,500 members, it's an anti-mandate group from here in Victoria. Here's what it says on their about page. This group is for the truth. Media doesn't show the truth, so we will show the truth here. My goal is to make sure that the entire world sees what corruption is happening within 4 governing organizations. Now, it didn't say what those 4 governing organizations are, so I really can't tell you. And then it says, any fake news will not be tolerated. Well, I don't think the moderators are actually doing their job very well, because one of the posts on this discussion forum is a campaign. I don't know if you've heard of this, but you know that we can remove Justin Trudeau from office by launching a public non-confidence votes. And all it takes is we have to send 958,000 emails to the Governor General. And if she gets that threshold, she can remove Trudeau from this public non-confidence vote. and that is one of the things that's being spread on this site. And the poor Governor General is being so inundated, apparently, that she actually had to come out and post something on social media saying, "I'm sorry, there's no such registry or process exists. It's just not true." Another post on this site is about the Great Reset. This is one of those conspiracy theories that just doesn't want to seem to die. And these theories were triggered by the World Economic Forum Summit in 2020, which had the misfortunate theme name of the Great Reset. Hindsight is always good, but the Great Reset would basically said that the COVID pandemic was an opportunity for us as world leaders, the World Economic Forum, to address some burning issues facing the world. But the conspiracy theories around the Great Reset go something like this. The Great Reset is the part of the global elite's plan to institute a communist world order by abolishing private property and using COVID-19 to solve overpopulation while enslaving what remains of humanity with vaccines. That's, in a nutshell, that's what it is. And on this site that I won't mention, this local webpage, there's a book excerpt, an excerpt from a book by Klaus Schwab, the chairman of the World Economic Forum, and it says that he wrote a book called The Great Reset. And the quote they use from it is this: they're saying that Klaus Schwab wrote this. 4 billion useless eaters will be eliminated by 2050 through limited war, organized pandemic, and fast-acting disease, and that energy, food, and water shall be kept at subsistence levels for the non-elites. Now, this person who posted this did have a bit of a disclaimer, because at the bottom, they wrote, "This is fact to FUX, letter U, fake, capital AZZ, fact." I don't know. I think that was a disclaimer, saying that they were just trying to mess with you. So that's on the printed side of things, on the web, on the web Facebook page. And then there's video media. And I shared with my students recently, I don't know how many of you have stumbled onto Rumble. Rumble is a version of YouTube that has been given breath to a lot of conservative right-wing voices, including Russell Brand. Russell Brand is the British comedian and actor, and his the titles of some of his videos are, "This is how the elite stay in power." And he talks about how the elite are out to control us, which is kind of interesting because Russell Brand is a multimillionaire celebrity. So I guess he's not he doesn't see himself as part of the elite. There's another one that's one of his talks is called "Russell Brand is right and everybody else is wrong." But my favorite Russell Brand thing was on the truckers convoy, and it says, "Why the mainstream media blackout?" And he said that the mainstream media isn't talking about this, and we've had to look at this story ourselves because the mainstream media wouldn't do it for us, and his arms are flailing and he's screaming. And oh, by the way, you can click at the bottom, and he says, "If you want to donate to my what is it? His meditation group, because things are too noisy in the world, I'll calm you down." But in the meanwhile, he's flailing around and he's telling everybody what the evil mainstream media, and he calls the mainstream media a nefarious machine that will do anything to shut down opposition. It's part of the authoritarian state. And he says, "If you agree with that, what the government and the media is telling you, have a look at what they're telling you, have a little think first." So Russell Brand is out to tell you the truth, just like these websites. And what's interesting, in the course of his video, he posts some slides with some information on it, and he quotes the CBC and the Ottawa Citizen and Global Television, and he quotes CPAC, which is the Government of Canada Parliamentary Channel. And at one point, he mixes the CBC up with the Christian Broadcasting Network. And it's a fascinating bit of hypocrisy. If you, I'm not encouraging you to go on Rumble and watch it, but if you like to go down that rabbit hole, go ahead and have a look. So all these reporters who were trying to get both sides of the story, that were trying to interview people, were swarmed, and they couldn't actually go into the crowds. It was actually too dangerous. And if they had actually let them come and talk to them, maybe they would have gotten what Globe and Mail reporter James Park gathered in a story that he wrote about a couple of days ago. And he went out to truckers after they were driven out of Ottawa. They gathered at a truck stop about 30 minutes outside of Ottawa. And Justin Trudeau had said that this was an example of these truckers gathered outside Ottawa was why he had to keep the Emergencies Act, because it was a sign that they were regrouping and they were coming back to invade. So James Park goes out there to check it out. Then he came back with a much different story. One that I think even convoy protesters would like, and one that certainly painted a different picture than what Justin Trudeau was saying. And here's what he wrote. I just want to read a bit of this. So this is the evil mainstream media that the protesters are complaining about. Among the convoy in Ottawa were truckers, farmers, business owners, families, people forced to retire for not getting COVID-19 vaccines, and people who were vaccinated but who were opposed to mandates. They came from small towns and cities and from every province. Many protesters now speak of the safe space they found in the Capitol, where they could express their views about the jab without feeling judged. A Manitoba farmer, for instance, wept when he spoke about the future facing his 18 grandchildren, comparing the erosion of individual choice to a dog whose chain is being shortened one link at a time. A truck driver from Quebec cried when he described having a falling out with an old friend over vaccine mandates. A 24-year-old actress from Vancouver who said she got vaccinated only to keep her job, broke up with her boyfriend when he didn't support her for flying to Ottawa for the protest. This was another experience many protesters shared, a trail of broken relationships, lost jobs in defense of the freedoms they believed were being stripped away. Her eyes tearing up as she spoke, one said, quote, "It's really a scary world that we are moving into, and I want to protect my children's future." Mrs. Sparks said she is concerned that Canadians are losing the ability to bridge divides with open debate. There's such a resistance to getting perspective from either side, she said. It's hard, she conceded, to find common ground when people believe the issue is a question of life or death. Quote, "Then everything gets skewed and relationships get torn. And if you don't see eye to eye on that, then you are the opposition, and that's that." And so James Park took photos of these people, they were willing to talk to them. And then he went across the road to a farm, which was private property where some of these truckers were staying, and he was asked to leave after about 30 minutes. So the strange thing, not the strange thing, what's really interesting is that the social media sites do not have to adhere to the same codes of ethics that mainstream media does. Things like transparency. One in the Canadian Association of Journalists Code of Ethics, one of the principles is transparency, that you cannot hide your ID. You have to be transparent on who you are. You can't use pseudonyms. Another aspect is fairness. You have to get both sides of the story. You have to verify. But social media sites, Facebook pages, can be run by anybody with a computer and an internet connection. They don't have to abide by that. They're getting millions and millions of viewers. So I'm here to tell you, and this I'm probably speaking to the converted, that the real fake news is not the mainstream media, which has its faults, of course, but it's essentially social media. And come with me for a minute. I want to leave time for questions. And I want to show you an example as well, if we can, of things we do in our course. But I want you to come down with a minute down the conspiracy rabbit hole. These are things that, if you were exploring ethics in real time, these are things that you might find. Did you know, for instance, that there are United Nations mercenary forces secretly landing in North Bay, Ontario? And then they're sent to Ottawa to crack down on the pandemic protests in Ottawa. And it must be true. There's photos. They got video of the planes there in North Bay that says UN on them. It's got to be. Well, Daniel Dale, Toronto Star at CNN, he checked into it. And actually, it's a company in North Bay called Voyager, I believe it is, that has a contract to service UN aircraft. And these UN aircraft fly all over the world on humanitarian missions. And if they were mercenaries going to Ottawa, you'd think they'd land a little closer than 400 kilometers away in North Bay to go to Ottawa. But anyway, so that was pretty much debunked. And actually, somebody on Rumble came out and said, "Oh, I hate to tell you, but it's not true." Here's a good one. I like this one. This was shared to me by a student. Did you know that there's a secret, that British Columbia government, the BC government, is running a secret COVID concentration camp in northern BC? It's true. It's in East Central BC in the mountains, and they found an installation ringed with barbed wire, and it was proof that there's a COVID concentration camp there where people who aren't getting vaccinated are put in this thing. The reality is that this was an infrastructure site for a gas pipeline. And when the student tried to explain to a family member that actually, no, was actually part of a pipeline project. She says, this person in her family says, well, how do you know? Well, actually, her boyfriend works at that site. He was there, and it's not a COVID concentration camp. And then the family member says, well, how do you explain the barbed wire? That's the state that we've gotten into. There are all kinds of things that we could talk about. There was, for instance, the woman who was trampled by the horse, this in Ottawa, by the police horses. This spread, this circulated in. Brianna, somebody asked. Yes, we'll talk about Brianna in just a second. So the woman trampled to death. This woman was trampled to death. 2 papers in India said, this woman was trampled to death, and they said what her name was, and I forget what it was, but it was a fake name that was actually some sort of an in-joke dealing with Fight Club. Maybe somebody knows about it. Anyway, so they used this fake name. And anyway, this was picked up by the Express in London. And it was eventually picked up by Fox News, by a reporter who said, with 13 million followers, 1.3 million followers. And this reporter said, this woman was trampled to death. And there's reports, and of course, the woman wasn't trampled to death. There was a woman who was knocked down. The police are investigating. They're trying to talk to the woman. And there is allegedly an interview with a woman who is supposedly that woman, but it's not verified. And anyway, saying that Justin Trudeau is evil, blah, 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 etc. Somebody asked, maybe we'll leave that to the end. How much time do we have? I wanted to actually share something, a very quick presentation here, and then we'll take some questions. This is one of the things that I shared in Ethics in Real Time, because this whole misinformation, this isn't exclusive to the right or to the conservative ecosystem. It's also endemic on the left. And if I have any success in sharing this, I'll just show you an example. This is I got interested in protests outside the Standing Rock pipeline in the fall of 2016. And the question I was trying to answer is if people who were in the social justice activist, do they follow the same ethics as professional communicators? And just quickly, there's where the pipeline runs. The encampment was along this line where where the Standing Rock Reservation is, and it was going to pass under a water supply. So this prayer camp was set up in April of 2016, and by the summer of 2016. There wasn't much media coverage that was going on, and this disturbed people who were at the site. And the reason there wasn't much media coverage at the time, because there was a big controversial presidential election going on in the United States with Donald Trump. And so according to social media that was covering this, social justice activists, they said that the corporate mainstream media refused to cover the story. And there was a photo posted of thousands of people claiming this is what the corporate media won't show you. And this is a photo that was run. This is what the media won't show you. This is the pipeline protest that you don't see. And it's posted by somebody by the name of Tyler Eldridge. There was also a photo that was posted of a heavily armed police officer confronting a child. And it says, North Dakota, US of America, you need to know what's happening. The tribes are not speaking up only for themselves. And this little girl is standing up for you. Others were posted of a herd of wild bison appearing out of nowhere as a sign from Mother Earth that the land must be protected. And here's social media saying thousands of wild buffalo appear out of nowhere at Standing Rock. There were claims that the United Nations were demanding that the pipeline be halted. That wasn't the case. It was a representative, a UN special envoy who come from particular points of view, and they're there to collect information and pass it on to the United Nations. So there was no United Nations resolution. All of these claims were provided to be false. So that story, that photo, was actually Woodstock, taken 47 years earlier. And this was the actual photo of the encampment. The photo of the little girl standing up to the police, that was actually taken in Chile. It was a protest in Chile, and a Facebook user called BC EcoHawk then retracted and said, "Oh, geez, I made a mistake." But they said, "But children are really still standing up for you." And the photo wasn't taken down, and it was shared thousands of times. The photo of the buffalo herd that appeared magically out of nowhere, it was actually a photo of a buffalo roundup at Custer State Park some years before, a wild herd. And the thousands of buffalo that appeared out of nowhere, this is actually the real buffalo herd that was actually driven to the site and then released just in time for the media to say, look, these thousands of buffalo are appearing. This is a sign that a sign from the creator that we have to stop this protest. And I'm going to cut it off here. We're going to take some questions, maybe go into some discussion. But here is the International Association of Business Communicators Code of Ethics. Because this just happened to be the one I checked. Here's the Journalism Codes of Ethics. And it raises a question of, should the internet and big data be regulated? And some of my students are working in teams right now on a project. And one of the issues that one of the teams is discussing is, should the internet be regulated? So there's other things that we could talk about. We could talk about how some of these ethical theories apply to some of the other issues that I've discussed, but maybe we could try and take some questions. I have 13 minutes left. Oh no. So let's go. Somebody asked earlier about the politician who shared somebody called Brienne, and that case was, and this was just recently in the last few days. This was Chuck Strahl, who was an MP from Hope, BC, and he said that he had a constituent named Brienne, who was a single mom who donated $50 to the trucker protest and had her account frozen. And he wouldn't provide any backup, any information. Journalists have to verify from two sources, or preferably even three. They just can't take the word of Chuck Strahl, and Chuck Strahl declined to provide any more information, saying he was protecting the privacy of this person. So, but he says it's absolutely true. I've seen her account information. But he's asking us simply to take his word, and people who have gone through lists have said there is no person named, the leaked list, there's no person named Brienne, and the RCMP said, no, we haven't shared individual donors. Maybe it's true, maybe it's not. But one of the ethical principles that apply to this is Immanuel Kant's, if you want to go down the ethics rabbit hole, it's his second formulation of his categorical imperative. It's known as the formula of humanity, also the end principle. And it basically says that you are not to use a person as a means to an end, but as an end unto themselves. So it would appear that Chuck Strahl may not be observing the ethics, ethical theory that Immanuel Kant gave us so many years ago. Are there any other questions? Who we have? What does the role of media consolidation play in this dialectic? Oh yeah, right. Postmedia, who I worked with for many years, just bought up all of Irving Media in Atlanta, Canada. And this is not healthy for democracy, absolutely not. One of the reasons that people don't trust mainstream media is all of the in the last, I believe in the last two federal elections, all of the Postmedia newspapers, which is the majority of mainstream newspapers in major cities, with the exception of well, the Globe and Mail in Toronto and the Toronto Star, were basically ordered to run the same editorial supporting the Conservatives for re-election. And it had to run on the front page. It was the exact same thing in every media. And, you know, I used to work at the Edmonton Journal when Conrad Black took over the company from Southam. The thing about Conrad Black was a conservative, but at least he was fairly smart. And somebody asked him, are we going to become this right-wing organ of you know, to spread your particular point of view? And his deputy, who was there, said, no, he says, we're businessmen primarily. And if we took all the liberal content out of the Edmonton Journal, nobody would buy it. Well, that didn't last very long. So no, to answer the question, the consolidation of media definitely is not definitely healthy for democracy. So any other questions? I didn't hear how the lack of trust in institutions has contributed to this and how we build back trust in our institutions. We have to talk to each other. We have to listen. Duarte was one of my students I saw, I think, in one of the last sessions. He said, are we just in an information war, or are we also in an ideological war? And we are in an ideological war. People on the left just absolutely don't believe anybody on the right, and people on the right don't believe anybody on the left. And we have to get back to Aristotle's theory of the golden mean. To achieve a balance between two extremes. John Stuart Mill told us that we had to tolerate every form of extreme speech, but he drew the line at speech that caused harm. And until we get to that, I mean, I know people who aren't vaccinated. They're not bad people. The people who run this Facebook page I told you about, I don't think they're bad people. I've never met them. I think they're truly disenchanted and feel disenfranchised. And we have to listen to people. I talked to some protesters, two girls, young women, last weekend at the truck convoy protest down in my neighborhood. And I asked them if they were part of the convoy, and they said yes. And they said, we believe in choice. And I said, I agree with you entirely. And they said, I said, are you tired of the mandates? And they said, yes, we're absolutely fed up. And I said, I am too. I am absolutely fed up with the mandates. I don't want to wear a mask, but my position, and it may be different from yours, is what I told them, is that this isn't about me. It's not about me, about not being able to do the things I want to do. It's about me taking action that will protect the immunocompromised. I think that the strong in our society have to protect the weak. And so I just had a conversation with them about this. I didn't call them names. They didn't call me names. And that's what I think we have to get back. We have to start conversations, and we have to listen to people. And in the last session, I think you heard that if you disagree with somebody, find common ground. And I found common ground with those two young women.
Robert,
I'm sorry.
Okay, I just want to remind you that you have 5 minutes more left of your presentation.
5 minutes more, great, thank you.
Okay, like if there are questions from if there are questions from our audience, we could get the questions right now and before wrapping up the session.
Sure. If there's anybody have a question, you can pop it in, or I can scroll through the chat here and see. Oh, there's some new messages. Any resources you want to point us to? How do you propose we deal with politicians who give weight and reinforce conspiracy theories? Like Brian Jean tweeted about the great reset yesterday. You know, I think we just have to explain to people about what is the great reset, this conspiracy theory, what is it? And just try and explain facts to them. I think the great reset, just like is a bad slogan, just like defund the police, you know, maybe refund the police would have been better. So, you know, just try and have conversations with these people who are spreading this out too. What else do we have here? Oh gosh. Anyway, we could go on and on. The one more thing, I'll just close with this. One of the things that we talked about in our class was the anniversary of the January 6th Capitol riots, and when we started this class, and so I asked students if they thought Trump was culpable or could be held responsible for this mob that attacked the Capitol, and I asked them to look at it from an theoretical ethical theory point of view. And what John Stuart Mill wrote about when he defended his classic defense of free speech, which was called On Liberty, he said that we have to tolerate every extreme of free speech, except if it causes harm. And he said, famous quote, "The only purpose for which power can be rightfully exercised over any member of a civilized community against his will is to prevent harm to others." And he used an example of corn dealers. The price of corn must have been really high when he wrote this. But he said, "An opinion that corn dealers are starvers of the poor or that private property is robbery ought to be unmolested when simply circulated through the press, but may justly incur punishment when delivered orally to an excited mob assembled before the house of a corn dealer." And if there is imminent danger that's going to arise, which is the standard of free speech in the United States, this is what John Stuart Mill was talking about. And the corn dealers were inside the US Congress, and the angry mob was outside screaming that corn dealers are robbers of the poor. And we saw what happened. And it remains to be seen. This is, of course, just ethical theory. It's not legal. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens if Trump is held culpable or responsible in any way. There's been some court action saying that, yes, he will. Christy, are we out of time?
Yes, but I think we could answer just one more question from Darren. He has a question on the chat box. Then after that, we could close the session.
That's a Darren. It says, what's your advice when presented with disinformation and misinformation offered publicly by social media contacts? Common ground often not possible. Personally feeling increasingly compelled to not passively let untrue and misleading commentary roll through. Well, the problem with the written word is that it hurts. If you talk to somebody orally, you can have a conversation. So you have to be really careful, Darren, when you're discussing these things. If you join a group that you disagree with and you have to have a conversation with them, try and find some common ground and say, one of the things I say to them, geez, I didn't know that. Where did you find that information? I'd like to look it up. And then from there, you can start hopefully a civil conversation. Some people you just cannot get through to. But don't try and change people's mind. Just try and have a conversation. Try and have some common ground. Practice what Kant told us about humanity and having respect for for everybody else, and John Stuart Mill having respect for various points of view, because without extreme points of view on either side, we're not going to be able to figure out what the truth is in the middle.
Thank you so much, Robert, for that very insightful session. And to all our audiences who participated and attended this session, thank you so much. And we will be having a 15-minute break to give way to the next session, which will be on the value of professionalism in strategic communications. Thank you so much, Robert, and thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.